Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Goodfirms Leaders Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host Suhana Bhattacharya, and today we have Michael Atkinson, Associate Vice President of the software development company Aspired. Now, Michael has over a decade of experience in business development, and at Aspired, he actively helps its clients build a remote team that helps them to succeed. So thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. Anything that you like to tell our audience about Aspired, something that I might have missed?
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I think as far as Aspired is concerned, you did a pretty good job in explaining what the company does. Just a few more bits would be that we provide dynamic team structures to really companies of all sizes to empower their products. And there's a lot that goes into that, but that's on a very high level. That's basically what we do.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that introduction. So, just some days before this podcast episode could take place, me and my team were going through the topics that we have covered so far in this podcast. And I was actually surprised to see that game development was not on the list. So, we are going to discuss the fascinating world of game development, which has so many opportunities for different businesses, developers, gamers, everyone. So, as I was going through some of the games on the internet and having conversations with some very hardcore gamer friends of mine, I came to know that the earlier video games can't be compared to the ones that we play now. It has taken a 360-degree turn. So, if someone wants to make their very first game, what are the steps that they must follow? What is your take on this, Michael?
Well, that's a great topic to start with. Game development has really been so transformative over the years. The process of game development, the elements, technologies, everything has made strides because of the kind of technology that we have. As far as gaming is concerned, for people who are starting out, if I was to, segment out a step-by-step guide, I'd say start with a clear understanding of what you want to develop. As an indie gamer or as a gaming studio, it's very important to have a very sort of clear understanding of a very precise vision of what you want in the game, what you want it to be, and also have a relative target audience basically identified so you know who you're working for and what sort of game elements the game needs to include for that target audience. The second step would be try to plan it out as best as you can, because that generally cuts down things like scope creep, which is notorious for taking different kinds of projects over budget. The next step I would say would be consider the technical requirements and the limitations of whatever platform you're targeting. The next step I would say would be keep it simple, keep it small. So building an MVP is perfect for indie gamers. If you ask 9 out of 10 gamers or indie game developers in particular, the number one issue that they face is getting their first game done. And so planning an MVP is something that is super essential. I can't really stress enough how important that is. I guess the next logical step once you've launched the MVP would be to gather as much as feedback as you can to polish the next version up. Then depending on, how big the game is, how big your firm is, you can go about creating hype for the game. So a lot of people do this in different ways. Some go organic, some use more accelerated methods in terms of marketing the overall game, and then simply making sure that you have enough network and resources for playtesting the game. And obviously, once again, depending on the size and structure of the overall game, it would be helpful to have a budget that basically allows you to keep up with industry trends and best practices.
Right. Of all the points that you've mentioned, I really like that, creating a game first can be overwhelming. So stick to the basic, simple things and build a minimum viable product to test how the game is actually doing and gather feedback on it and then proceed. So game development right now has taken a 360-degree turn. So storytelling has been one of the prime selling points of successful games. Players are not just playing games for the visuals, but also because they connect to the storyline. So I'm sure there might be some writers who are also listening to our podcast. So, could you please give
Mhm.
them some points on how to actually create impactful stories that can help them connect with the gaming audience better?
Sure, absolutely. So for me, storytelling is at the very core of game development. The game mechanics are as good as the story itself. Now, when you talk about stories in game development, there are different types of games, different scales of game development. But in those games, in terms of storytelling, what I've seen that works best is number one, knowing your audience. Basically, understand the type of people that you're targeting, what their interests are, and then develop a world based on that. The next step would be once you know that audience, create characters that are very relatable, that can connect with that specific target audience well, and sort of share some common problems that you would find with that particular target audience. A quick example of that is within the realm of DC Comics. One of the reasons why Batman is so popular, I mean, if you think about it, he doesn't really have any powers. But what makes his character so unique and so compelling is that he is a human and he's trying to wave around his fancy gadgets, use that big brain of his, and plus he has other attributes. But at the end of the day, he is a human character, and so he has to go through day-to-day problems that we guys sometimes go through as well. And so that is what sort of for me helps connect specific characters in a game so well to their target audience so that they could experience the game through their characters, and that's what ultimately creates a great storyline. Then obviously the environment that you create, so the world, the stages that you would create for people. For open world games, you have a lot of detail because they're so massive. You see games like PUBG, Fortnite, they're all very in tune with the overall concept. So creating a very compelling world is very important as well to keep to the aforementioned points. And then at the end of the day, I mean, the main thing that you can do as a story writer is keep it simple, keep it straightforward, and then gradually up the ante with nuanced characters.
Thank you so much for these points that you've just mentioned. So, Michael, do you remember games like Farmville or Pac-Man?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so their user interface was very different from the games that our friends are playing today. Could you please let our audience know the changing demands which has led to the change in game design? How has the things changed?
Sure. So, very particular examples that you gave, Farmville and Pac-Man. So, very different genres. I think the year of their development was also vastly different. In terms of Pac-Man, obviously that was primarily a sort of an arcade game that, people would usually play at arcades. As for Farmville, people got hooked onto that because of the social element, and essentially gaming in general nowadays from a social perspective is more towards virtual reality, metaverse, NFTs, things like that. And as such, as you can imagine, the expectation that players have overall across the board has changed. So, for example, players are generally more accustomed to having very immersive experiences, detailed environments, specifics that go beyond just the normal gameplay. And plus, nowadays, in terms of game design, you have to also keep in mind player economics, game economics as well, because in general, social games look to give back to the user, which previously was not the case. So players now expect to get something in return for their time that they spend on the game. Mobile, it has been huge in the world of gaming. I would say, based on the stats at the end of last year and at the end of Q1 this year, mobile gaming was at the top. And so, predominantly, I think as far as reach, mobile has the advantage, although in terms of popularity, you would see consoles and PCs be at one. So, obviously, when you're creating a game, you have to be mindful of game design as it relates to mobile, as it relates to PC, web, basically all your consoles and who your target audience is. So the game design varies from that perspective as well. And what's more, I think I alluded to this earlier on, is that games are now very community driven, especially social games. So things like Discord are usually at the heart of the onboarding process for a lot of the games now. And plus, augmented reality, as I mentioned, virtual reality has made strides in game design as well. So that's a huge competing factor as well, depending on the application of your game.
Yeah. So thank you so much for touching on all these topics like metaverse and how the psychology of players have changed, and thus there is a change in game design as well. So there are many disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence or AR VR that you just talked about. So how do they create a more immersive gameplay experience, and what are some of the challenges these technologies bring while it is being implemented into the game development?
Okay, so essentially, artificial intelligence has helped game development in many different ways. The most earliest adaptation of artificial intelligence was player versus environment, or in general, player versus computer. A very early example of this would be Street Fighter. You had the option to play with a friend, or you would just go on a story mode and you would essentially play with the computer. Nowadays, AI has really helped with forming the entire experience that comes with game development. This translates from not just the average playthrough, but you would see this in enemies, you would see this in how your environment reacts, you would see this really around the overall experience. Some examples of this would be non-playable characters. In past games, you would see non-playable characters not being so attuned to how you play a game. Nowadays, because of AI, depending on the decisions you make in a game, the non-playable characters or NPCs act differently. So you have different situations to work with depending on how you play the game. So let's say you're faced with a scenario that your player's walking down the street and you all of a sudden get mugged, you get robbed. Basically, at gunpoint, someone's trying to steal your belongings and you have a partner with you. Some games, depending on how they're programmed, you would have a different scenario if you just let up and give your possessions to them, or if you tend to sort of retaliate and have a basically an altercation with them. So different dynamics would come to play. If you just let up, you would simply, lose your possessions, have to work from scratch. On the flip side, it would be that, if you actually get into some kind of a fight with them, you'd have to work with the police to identify those people or work with their bosses to, it's a whole different world of things that you have to work with. A good example of this, again, would be games like Cyberpunk 2077, The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, in where within Cyberpunk, one of the good examples would be, every situation or challenge you're faced with, you could choose basically an all-out fight to get to where you want to be, whether it's evading the police, evading gang members, what have you, or you could use stealth to get where you want to go. And the situation in the game itself from a broader level sort of dynamically changes to how you are as a player. That is AI. In The Last of Us, you have your NPCs whose behavior changes depending on how you play the game. If it's stealth, their behavior changes. If it's more sort of bash and go kind of a playing style, which usually doesn't rely on stealth, then it's a different kind of reaction from them as well. So there are different kinds of basic applications when it comes to how artificial intelligence reacts to your overall game. So it depends on how you implement it and how well you can control the application of it.
So moving forward, different devices demand games to be adaptable to different screen sizes
Sure.
or configurations, etc. So how do you approach designing a game for different platforms like mobile or console or PC? And what challenges do you face when adapting a game for multiple platforms?
Sure. So generally speaking, when you're launching a game on multiple platforms, it's very important to understand the technological limits that each platform presents. Things like screen sizes, CPU, GPU load limits, possible bottlenecks in terms of the performance versus visual quality balance, UX, generally device specific features, and optimization of the actual performance app as a game in the background. So depending on your game, again, you have to be very mindful of things like that. The basic level ones are essentially the ones that I just mentioned. So FPX, game threads, CPU, GPU loads. If you played any of the latest games that are pretty heavy games, for example, PUBG, they have different visual quality modes that affect the actual performance of the game itself. So if you have a low-end phone or a entry-level phone, you would generally need to select a lower visual quality mode for you so that the experience does not lag. But if you have a flagship phone of the Android or let's say the iPhone 14 Pro, it would automatically select the best possible visual quality because the game basically knows that the GPU and the CPU and all those technical factors are basically taken care of because the phone itself, the hardware and the software can essentially take that load. So things like that, it's very important to understand.
Yeah. So I am not that much into gaming, but there are a couple of friends of mine who are into it, and they do tell me why a specific game is suitable more for PC and not for mobile. And now I really know the difference that you just mentioned here. If we have to go down the memory lane almost 5 years back, we never knew what would be the potential of game development. We could not think of maybe monetizing it or using fancy devices like AR, VR devices to feel we are in the game, but we are here now. So, just like this, as a leading game development company, what is the future of games? What new things can be seen as far as design or development is concerned?
So there are a few things that are sort of hugely debated, but for us, the top two I would say would be number one, streaming. Eventually, we feel that games that stream live can be played on the go. Everybody basically wants to play with their friends, with their family, especially while, let's say, if you're commuting on a bus, you basically want to kill some time. And so we feel with the infrastructure moving towards that way with 5G, which can be seen, happening perhaps by 2025 or before that, streaming would be something that is adapted to gaming fairly soon. The second thing would be from a development perspective, we're seeing really not just development, but overall would be remote teams. The majority of companies now are sticking to either hybrid workforce solutions or then remote workforce solutions. The other one from a development perspective, I would say would be cloud-based development because there's an increase in the kind of games that you want to have, and making it cloud-based or blockchain-based just makes sense for the type of games that are being built now.
Right. Moving to the last question, just like how the gaming market is getting a lot cluttered with new games coming up almost every single day. So, is the number of game development companies in the market? So, in such scenarios, we wanted to know how has GoodFirms helped you have the edge over your competitors?
Sure. So GoodFirms has been very helpful. I'd say instrumental when it comes to help us sort of clarifying what our offering is, what our unique selling propositions are, what our values are, and essentially what we bring to our clientele. Overall, the offering that we have for us is very straightforward because how simple it is. But for a lot of the clients that are sometimes non-tech related, it's somewhat difficult to them. And GoodFirms has really helped us simplify that messaging and sort of make it more apparent, help our clients understand sort of the values that we bring to the table. And ultimately, the objective for us has been to foster a sustainable success for our clients. And I say that GoodFirms has played a very crucial role for us in promoting that vision.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael, for including GoodFirms in your growth journey, and I hope it continues to do the same. We talked about game development and the awesome opportunities it is bringing for developers, changes in design, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. It really means a lot to us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Sohana. It's been a great discussion.